Hey everyone, I have a new tripod for my videos, and I thought I would just try it out on a new very brief series of biographies. I thought I would just recommend again some old biographies and some new biographies, and do them in two short clips. First, why biographies? Um, First, why biographies is because most historians of literature that I know, at least, and have read, say that the Gospels themselves are, in a way, the first biographies in a sense. There are other portraits of people, of course, but of course none as important as the portraits of Jesus Christ in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And those Gospels are really biographies of the person and work of who we believe Jesus of Nazareth to be. He is the Lord of glory, the soon-coming King, the Christ, the chosen one, the anointed of Psalm 2. And they're proclaiming who he is and what he's done. So in a lot of ways, they're biographies. So it's very Christian to read biographies, actually. And so, and I love biographies because it just shows that God is more interested in you than an idea about you. And that God is more than an idea, but extremely intimately personal and tri-personal, Father, Son, and Spirit, with his creation. And so I think biographies are just such a great way to learn, to grow as a Christian, to grow as a person, and to see how God's used people. It's just fascinating to me. So I thought I'd just recommend very quickly, without a ton of discussion, some old biographies, and then I'll finish with a very short segment on new biographies. So first, some old biographies. You really kind of can't get much older, I guess, apart from the Gospels themselves, than the autobiography of Saint Augustine of Hippo, North Africa. So Saint Augustine, not of hippopotamus, but of Hippo, and it's his confessions. Notice the pear being eaten there. He was convicted of his sinfulness, his waywardness, when he stole those pears. And back in those times, stealing's bad today, but it was punishable by death. It was so extreme back then. But the Confessions, of course, is an autobiography, and perhaps the greatest biography of a Christian potentially ever written. Apart from, of course, the Gospels themselves being the biographies of Jesus the Christ, I think St. Augustine's Confessions, and this is a new edition that's being done, I think, by Sarah Rudin, and it's extremely good. And I would encourage you to get this edition. This is the better edition. It's been published by Modern Library, and it's a new translation by Sarah Rudin. And I think it came out just a few years ago, but this is how it looks, okay? And it's incredible, and the translation reads very easily. I've been using it for my devotionals, and just for when I have 10 or 15 minutes, I crack it open and I read. So that's one. The second one is a great one on Martin Luther, and it was written some time ago. Again, it's an old biography, given that it's published back in 1982. Okay, and it's by Heike Obermann, called Luther Between God and the Devil, Man Between God and the Devil. And this is, to me, the best biography of Martin Luther. There's like 40 or 50 out there. This is written from a critical perspective of who he is in history at the end of the medieval period, and really kind of how his rediscovery of the gospel that was promulgated in the scriptures, carried forth by St. Augustine and the other church fathers, was picked back up by Martin Luther in his reading of the Psalms especially, and then of course Romans and Galatians. This book is just incredible. It's not that hard to read. I mean, it looks hard. I mean, look at the beard. Like, it's kind of a scary beard, so you're like, this has got to be a hard book. It's not that hard to read. There's pictures even in it. Some kind of fantastical pictures of who people would paint Martin Luther out to be, this devil and this charlatan and all sorts of crazy stuff. And it's an incredible book. One of the best biographies I've ever read, and best book on Luther I've ever read, or on Luther's thought or life. And so it's a little bit of both. It's kind of him situated in his historical situation. It's extremely good. So that one is excellent. This one's probably a little bit less old. I think it was written in 2000. Yeah, it's not an old biography, but it's about a bunch of old guys. So maybe that qualifies. I think it was written in 2005, 2006. Okay, so by Joel Beakey, and it's called Meet the Puritans. And this is just a great resource. It's a great resource because you can read about all sorts of Puritans throughout many centuries in 5, 10, and sometimes 20. You know, John Owen, John Bunyan, Thomas Watson, a few others get like a lot of love. Some of the Puritans get like 2 pages. You're like, you know. And so this is an incredible resource, and it's like a short bio of all of those famous Puritans. Now there's individual books on most of them, but this is more succinct and helpful, I think. So it's called Meet the Puritans, a guide to the modern reprints as well. So it's not just a bio; it also talks about all the reprints of their works. I mean, it's just an incredible book. So not the oldest, but a real good one. This one was written by Ian Murray a few years back on really probably one of the most famous preachers of the 20th century. And I think it was back in 2008. So these aren't, I guess, I probably should include this in the new one, but we'll go with this. But it's Martin Lloyd-Jones, Messenger of Grace. Extremely good. Anything by Ian Murray is good. So if you're interested Christian or someone who's looking to really grow, buy books by Ian Murray, okay? This guy he does the business. He knows what he's doing. And it just gives you an honest appraisal of Martin Lloyd-Jones as a human being, which is hard to find. You find a lot of people that trumpet his preaching as kind of the standard, but you don't hear a lot about him as a person. Now, they, of course, just did a wonderful, Media Gratia just did a great tribute to Martin Lloyd-Jones with his 2-part series video that they just came out with. And I think they do a pretty good job of making sure he's humanized, but this is better. It's a better book that really goes into his entire life, not just the effects of his ministry, not just the style of preaching and how God used him in history, but I think it goes a little bit more an intimate photo of who he was as a person. So very, very good. Do 3 more. This one won the Pulitzer Prize a few decades ago. Very worth note just for the literature aspect. Also very important to understand that there's a lot of books on this man, but this is considered for many to be kind of the standard on his life and legacy. And this is none other than Bearing the Cross, David Garrow's book on Martin Luther King Jr. And so kind of a hefty 900 pages? No, 800 pages, but extremely easy. Again, these are easy to read books. They're not like theology or math or something, okay? But they're really just very good, easy to read books. And Bearing the Cross, of course, won the Pulitzer Prize about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. It's kind of a standard that everyone should have that really wants to know more about religion in America and of course the effect in the Black church upon religion in America and the civil rights movement. It's an important book to have, not just as a pastor or a Christian, a volunteer serving somewhere, but just as a Christian. It's just good to know the legacy in our country. And this is a very, very important book, Bearing the Cross. 2 more. Ian Murray. Again, he writes a lot of biographies. He's written a lot. This one, to me, is the best, I think, on Jonathan Edwards, and I'm not alone in that. It's called Jonathan Edwards, A New Biography. It was written in 1988. It's not that new, but it's a little bit better than to my view, George Marsden's and a few others, because it just paints a more whole human picture of him. It's also coming from a place of deep reverence, I think, for how God used him. So it's not just historical and factual. I think it's also dives in a lot to just the intensity and the intimacy of his ministry and his home life and things like that. So the book is very, very good. I just would encourage you to get, if you have one biography of Jonathan Edwards or a Puritan, it needs to be this, Ian Murray's book on him. So I would encourage you that. Fun factoid again, if you've not watched my videos before, but he talks about how in this picture, this was Jonathan Edwards actually airbrushed, which is fascinating. So he was a very kind of, he wasn't a dour man necessarily. He was just a sick, weakly man, and a sickly man, and so he was barely getting by. So a lot of these pictures of him are spruced up, airbrushed, Instagrammed, basically. So that's an interesting thing. Last one is another autobiography, so not necessarily a bio, but an autobio, and it's really, really interesting to me. And this one is John Bunyan's Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners. And John Bunyan lived a hard life. He was born into a lower middle class family. Through his ministry, eventually, of course, he was imprisoned for 12 years. He wrote most of his classics actually in prison, as most end up doing. Right? They read a lot of their classic works in prison. Apostle Paul, anybody? And so, I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. letters from Birmingham jail. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, letters and papers from prison. I mean, it's kind of a theme there, right? So he wrote a lot of books in prison. He was a very burdened man, but a man who was burdened most by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And John Bunyan is, I just think he's one of the great heroes of the faith, not just because of his writings that are voluminous in allegorical, topical, thematic, and theological output. There's actually a ton of work he did, but just in the legacy of in England, in America, and beyond of his life and his writings. So I think that's a lot. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7 to start you off with from some old biographies. Hopefully that'll whet your appetite just a little bit. But just remember, biographies are a real good gateway into really how Christian life works. When you see it lived out by those who are worthy, I think, to speak about and to investigate, it's very, very important. So those are some old biographies, and I'm going to give you, I think, about 5 or 6 more new biographies.